Keep him busy!
We are in serious trouble.
I remember the first time I watched The Mummy when I was 10 years old in 2000, and the awakening scene scared me so badly that I jumped off the sofa and clung to my mother. Although the film is not a horror movie, the eerie elements woven into it are genuinely effective. Not just that scene, but the way Imhotep is portrayed as an almost invincible monster. Devouring pieces of those who stole his jars to regenerate his body truly left a lasting sense of dread. But the most frightening thing wasn't on the screen. The truth is, The Mummy nearly became a completely different film. A bloody horror version led by Clive Barker, a world in which Leonardo DiCaprio might have been the central hero. And a project that once stood on the brink of being buried as a B-movie, only saved by an unexpected financial decision that grew out of the failure of a small talking pig. There were even behind-the-scenes details that Brendan Fraser once revealed about Patricia Velasquez she wasn't acting at all. And today we reopen the doors to the behind-the-scenes world of The Mummy 1999. 20. Leonardo DiCaprio almost became the film's lead. Before Brendan Fraser picked up a gun and stepped into the desert, The Mummy nearly had a completely different face. Universal viewed the role of Rick O'Connell as the soul of the film, an Indiana Jones-style adventure hero, strong, witty and imperfect. Because of that, they approached a long list of A-list stars such as Tom Cruise, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon and Brad Pitt. Most either turned it down or couldn't make the schedule work. The one who showed genuine interest was Leonardo DiCaprio, who at the time was at the peak of his fame after Titanic. DiCaprio wanted the role, but he was contractually bound to star in The Beach. He even asked to delay the production of The Beach so he could do The Mummy, but the studio refused, forcing him to step away. Ironically, The Beach was later delayed anyway, meaning DiCaprio could have done The Mummy after all if the decision had been more flexible. In the end, the role went to Brendan Fraser. Stephen Sommers and the producers were convinced by his physical energy and natural charm in George of the Jungle. The choice turned out to be exactly right. Fraser brought a Rick O'Connell who could kick ass yet still feel relatable, so much so that today it's hard to imagine The Mummy without him. 19. The gold coating on the body wasn't CGI.
To risk life itself.
The moment Ankh Sunamun stands naked during the living mummification ritual, her body gradually covered in shimmering gold under flickering torchlight, is one of the most haunting images in The Mummy 1999. The scene looks like pure CGI, but the truth is the opposite. Most of what audiences see on screen was done with practical effects. The production used real metallic paint applied directly to the actress's body, rather than relying on computer graphics. In the late 1990s, CGI wasn't yet advanced enough to convincingly recreate metal tightly clinging to human skin under harsh lighting. So director Stephen Sommers chose a hands-on approach. The process was extremely punishing. The actress had to stand still for hours during makeup application, endure intense heat from the studio lights, and bear the weight of thick paint on her skin. In return, the scene gained a heavy, suffocating realism. The gold didn't just look good, it had weight pressure and presence. That's what makes the mummification ritual feel less like a mystical spectacle and more like a truly horrifying punishment. 18. The Mummy was once a Clive Barker project. Before becoming a dusty, high-spirited adventure, The Mummy nearly went down a far darker path. In the early 1990s, Universal Pictures officially greenlit a modern remake of The Mummy 1932. The project was overseen by producers James Jacks and Sean Daniel with an initial vision as a low-budget horror film costing around $10 million. The filmmaker invited to lead it at the time was Clive Barker, the mind behind Hellraiser and Candyman. According to production records and later interviews, Barker envisioned the Mummy set in the contemporary world centered on a museum controlled by a secret cult where ancient rituals were used to resurrect the mummy. The tone was unmistakably Barker, violent, sensual, and heavily focused on body horror with almost no room for adventure or humour. As development continued, however, Universal gradually wanted to steer the project towards something more accessible to mainstream audiences. The two sides couldn't reach an agreement, and Barker ultimately left the film. That split sent The Mummy back to square one, but it also cleared the path for the adventure entertainment version that eventually emerged. Still, I can't help but wish Barker's vision of The Mummy had made it to the big screen. 17. Filming locations. A real desert, real danger. The Mummy didn't just look harsh on screen, it was filmed under genuinely brutal conditions. Production began in Morocco, with the Sahara Desert serving as the primary setting. The real-life location of Gara Medouar, a horseshoe-shaped volcanic crater, was chosen to represent the city of Hamunaptra. It's probably a landscape that looks familiar to you, isn't it? The cast and crew had to work in extreme arid heat, facing a constant risk of severe dehydration. The medical team was forced to mix a special rehydration solution and required everyone to drink it at regular 2-hour intervals. Snakes, venomous spiders and scorpions appeared frequently. Some crew members were even hospitalized after being bitten. On top of that, sandstorms struck almost daily, disrupting the shooting schedule and destroying sets. Few people know that the production was also ensured against kidnapping, a completely serious precaution. To reduce risk, many interior scenes were later moved to the safer environment of Shepperton Studios in England. But the soul of the desert in The Mummy was entirely real, and so was the price paid for it. 16. The music of The Mummy. When melody opens a door through time. From the very first notes, you know you're about to step into an adventure. The score for The Mummy was composed by Jerry Goldsmith, one of the greatest legends in Hollywood film music. This was Goldsmith at his most quintessential, but also Goldsmith in his later years, seasoned, bold, and full of energy. He blended Middle Eastern and Egyptian-inspired motifs with classic adventure scoring, creating a sound that was mysterious, exhilarating, and at times as triumphant as Indiana Jones. What makes it even more remarkable is that Goldsmith composed The Mummy during a period of near overwork, simultaneously scoring The Haunting, The 13th Warrior, and Hollow Man. And yet this soundtrack overflows with vitality, as if he were reminding audiences that cinematic adventure was still alive. Just a few years later, in 2004, Jerry Goldsmith passed away. In retrospect, The Mummy is often regarded as one of his last truly great scores, a brilliant farewell. 15. The alternate opening. Do you remember? The Mummy opens with a flashback set in ancient Egypt, where we learn about Imhotep's forbidden love affair with Ankh-Sunamun, the pharaoh's wife, an affair that ultimately leads to his mummification. However, the original opening was planned to be slightly different. Early on, the filmmakers imagined it as a direct tribute to the 1932 original film. The Universal logo was meant to appear in a classic 1930s design, then dissolve into the blazing desert sun. The narration at that stage was written for Imhotep himself, performed by Arnold Vosloo. But Stephen Sommers quickly realised a fundamental problem. Imhotep only speaks ancient Egyptian, and having him open the film with English dialogue would break the internal logic of the world. As a result, the narration was reassigned to Ardeth Bay, played by Oded Fehr, a more coherent choice that allowed audiences to enter the story in a smoother and more convincing way. 14. The animated series. The success of The Mummy did not stop at the big screen. In addition to 2 sequels and the spin-off, The Scorpion King Universal expanded the world of the film into animation with a dedicated television series. The Mummy. The animated series produced by Universal Cartoon Studios ran for 2 seasons and aired from 2001 to 2003, although many viewers later were not even aware that it ever existed. The series follows the O'Connell family on adventures around the world, repeatedly coming into conflict with Imhotep and other supernatural threats. Due to licensing limitations, the characters' designs and voices did not closely resemble their live-action counterparts, which somewhat reduced the sense of familiarity. However, the storytelling itself was fairly ambitious, featuring multi-layered plots that were sometimes more complex than what was typical for children's animation. While not everyone has nostalgic ties to the series, it remains an interesting piece of the Mummy's expanded history, especially for those who want to explore the franchise in full. 13. Brendan Fraser nearly lost his life while filming The Mummy. Do you remember the scene where Rick O'Connell is hanged in the town square, his feet dangling as Evelyn desperately bargains for his life? On screen, it plays as a tense adventure moment. Behind the scenes, it nearly became a real tragedy. While filming the scene, Brendan Fraser was left hanging longer than was safe. Despite the presence of safety rigging, his body was constricted tightly enough that he could not breathe. Fraser lost consciousness on set and had to be revived by the crew. Rachel Weisz later recalled that the moment was truly terrifying because no one immediately realised that the situation had gone beyond acting. Ironically, a nearly identical incident had happened years earlier to Michael J. Fox while filming Back to the Future Part 3. The lesson is clear: even simulated hangings are extremely dangerous. What is remarkable is that after the accident, Fraser still completed the film with the energy, charm, and adventurous spirit that defined Rick O'Connell. Perhaps it is that very risk that gives The Mummy its authentic sense of danger both in front of and behind the camera. 12. The Mummy was almost just a low-budget B-movie. In its early stages, Universal did not view The Mummy as a major project. The initial plan was for a quickly made adventure horror film with a budget of around $15 million, something to release in theatres and then quietly move on from. Everything changed because of an unrelated failure, Babe Pig in the City. That sequel performed poorly at the box office and triggered a management shake-up at Universal. The new leadership wanted to prove themselves with a bold move. They needed a true blockbuster, and The Mummy was suddenly chosen. The budget was raised dramatically to around $80 million, and the scale of production expanded: completely larger sets, more visual effects, and far greater ambition. From a project that was nearly buried, The Mummy became a major studio gamble and ultimately one of the most successful adventure films of the late 1990s. 11. Before Rachel Weisz became inseparable from the image of Evelyn Carnahan, Universal considered several other options. Jennifer Lopez, who had just made waves with Selena and Out of Sight, and Ashley Judd, fresh off her breakout role in Kiss the Girls, were both on the list. Each had clear star power, but something was missing. The character of Evelyn needed to be intelligent and passionately devoted to knowledge, yet believably fragile. The kind of person who could knock over an entire bookshelf in a library, but still stand her ground in the face of a resurrected mummy. Then Rachel Weisz appeared. At the time, she was largely unknown, with only a handful of minor roles to her name. Yet in her audition, Weisz delivered exactly what Stephen Sommers was looking for: sharp intelligence, a sense of curiosity in her eyes, and a vulnerability that never felt weak. The role instantly altered the trajectory of her career. Weisz later admitted that she had no idea how big The Mummy would become, only that the film gave her the role that changed everything. The other names were quickly swept away like sand in the desert, and a new star was born, quite literally, amid the heat and dust of Egypt. 10. Becoming Imhotep wasn't just acting. Do you remember the moment Imhotep first appears? Rotting flesh, eyes burning in the darkness, every step seeming to drag 1,000 years of curses behind him. That chilling effect didn't come only from visual effects, it began on Arnold Vosloo's body. To transform into Imhotep Vosloo endured a makeup process that bordered on torture. Before CGI dominated filmmaking, the practical effects team covered him for hours in layers of latex paint and prosthetics. His entire body was sealed so tightly that he could barely move. By the end of each shooting day, his skin burned. His face was swollen and his eyes were bloodshot. Vosloo later said that when the makeup was removed, the deep impressions left on his skin startled him, as if Imhotep's curse had crossed into real life. The irony was unmistakable. He was portraying a character buried alive and punished beyond death, while the makeup itself made him feel a version of that suffering. Before CGI resurrected Imhotep on screen, the makeup had already turned Vosloo into a mummy in real life. 9. Everything was old-school illusion, real fire, real shells and collapsing wood. Do you remember the scene where scarabs swarm across the stone floor and crawl over the characters' bodies, sending them into panic? That sense of horror didn't come entirely from computers. Although The Mummy is often remembered as a CGI-heavy spectacle, it actually relied heavily on practical effects. According to interviews with Stephen Sommers and the effects team, many of the scarab shots were created using real models and mechanical puppets attached directly to stunt performers to create the sensation of something crawling on the skin. The explosions weren't green screen effects either. They were real pyrotechnics detonated in the Moroccan desert with actors standing only a few meters away. The collapsing walls of Hamunaptra were built full scale and then actually brought down, sending dust and debris crashing over the set and into the camera lenses. That's why the film still feels dangerous today. The audience isn't just seeing chaos, they're watching real things burn, break and fall apart right in front of their eyes. 8. Tested by fire with real audiences before release. Before its official release, The Mummy went through multiple test screenings in the United States, a step Universal treated very seriously after committing a large budget to the project. According to producer Sean Daniel in later interviews, early audience reactions were fairly divided. Some viewers felt the film was too fun and not scary enough for something marketed as a monster movie. Stephen Sommers did not go back to make the film darker, but he refined the pacing. Some comedic moments were shortened and certain horror beats were tightened to keep the adventure moving forward without losing momentum. More importantly, he focused on clarifying and strengthening the relationship between Rick and Evelyn. Because test screenings showed that audiences connected most strongly with these two characters. The result was a theatrical cut that struck a rare balance, frightening enough to create tension, light enough to be entertaining. Those test screenings didn't make The Mummy safer, they helped it find the right rhythm. 7. The filming schedule was designed like a military campaign. The production of The Mummy did not follow a relaxed, typical Hollywood shooting schedule. According to director Stephen Sommers and producer James Jacks, the schedule was organised almost like a military operation as the crew had to move constantly between the Moroccan desert and sound stages in England. Every outdoor shooting day had a very narrow time window, avoiding the harshest hours of heat to protect both the cast and the equipment. Large-scale action scenes were filmed early while the actors were still physically able to endure the extreme conditions. Dialogue-heavy scenes and interior sequences were saved for the later stages at Shepperton Studios, where conditions were far more controlled. Sommers admitted that without such tight organisation, the film could have fallen weeks behind schedule simply because of weather. The Mummy may look like a spontaneous adventure on screen, but behind it was a production machine calculated down to the hour. One of the key reasons the film was completed on time and at full blockbuster scale. 6. Patricia Velasquez's role as Ankh-Sunamun revealed almost everything. Do you remember the moment Ankh Su Namun walks through the ritual chamber torchlight, reflecting off the shimmering black and gold patterns on her skin just before death, and the curse descend? The scene is both sensual and chilling, and it was created almost entirely in real life. Patricia Velasquez's costume contained almost no clothing in the conventional sense. Aside from a loincloth, a few pieces of jewellery and minimal coverings, her body was entirely painted. Every morning, the makeup team spent around 4 hours hand-painting intricate black and gold designs onto her skin, line by line, until her body became a living suit of armour under the studio lights. Velasquez had to remain nearly motionless, no leaning, no sudden movement, no sweating, because even a single smudge could ruin the illusion. In a film filled with mummies, scarabs and collapsing temples, one of its most unforgettable images was created using nothing more than paint light and extreme patience. 5. When a weakness became a weapon. When The Mummy was preparing for its release in 1999, Universal was far from confident. In the eyes of many executives, this was just another monster movie remake, an attempt to revive the enormous shadow of Boris Karloff. Test screenings only deepened their concern. Feedback frequently repeated words like over-the-top silly and too much. Some observers predicted that the film would sink quickly and that the studio's $80 million would vanish like sand in the desert. But when audiences actually entered theatres, everything shifted. They laughed at the banter, responded enthusiastically to the adventure-driven pacing, and accepted the very tone that critics had dismissed. What was seen as a weakness became a weapon. Universal expected a hard fall. Critics waited for a loud failure. What they did not anticipate was that audiences had seen a kind of magic they had overlooked, and that the very excess labelled too much was what kept The Mummy alive. 4. Stephen Sommers refused to yield to Universal's demands. Initially, Universal did not hire Stephen Sommers to make a light-hearted adventure film. They wanted a remake rooted firmly in horror dark, serious and bloody, closer to classic monster films than to escapist entertainment. Put simply, they wanted audiences to be frightened, not amused. Sommers thought differently. He envisioned The Mummy as a nostalgic adventure blending the spirit of Indiana Jones with the swashbuckling charm of Errol Flynn. The film needed action romance, witty exchanges, and a flawed but likeable hero. This concept worried the studio. They feared that a lighter tone would damage an iconic monster brand. Disagreements dragged on the budget was repeatedly questioned, and Sommers was asked to make it darker. He did not give in. When the film was released, that choice proved correct. Brendan Fraser's humour, Rachel Weisz's appeal, and the film's buoyant sense of adventure turned The Mummy from a risky remake into a beloved blockbuster. Universal wanted fear. Sommers delivered fun, and that is precisely what has allowed the film to endure. 3. The desert did not only attack with heat and sandstorms, it poisoned them as well. Do you remember the scenes of the group trudging through Hamunaptra, drenched in sweat, faces pale under the desert sun? In real life, that exhaustion was not acting. During filming in Morocco, nearly the entire cast and crew of The Mummy suffered from food poisoning. According to later interviews with Stephen Sommers and multiple crew members, there were days when shooting had to be completely cancelled because actors kept falling ill, rushing to medical tents or toilets in the middle of the desert. Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz both confirmed that almost everyone got hit, from the lead actors to the technical crew. But there was one strange exception: Arnold Vosloo. He refused to eat local food and relied only on meals prepared separately. As a result, while the rest of the crew struggled with stomach pain and dehydration, Vosloo remained healthy, calmly moving around the set. Ironically, the actor playing the cursed mummy was the only one untouched by the desert's curse in real life. 2. Evelyn Carnahan's funniest scene almost became the most dangerous one. One of Evelyn Carnahan's most humorous moments nearly turned into a serious accident. The scene where she knocks over the library bookshelves looks light and playful on screen, but in reality, it involved more than 2,000 real books placed on tall wooden shelves engineered to collapse in a chain reaction like dominoes. If even one shelf failed to fall at the correct moment, the entire shop would be ruined, and rebuilding the setup could take days. Rachel Weisz insisted on performing the scene herself. No stunt double, no tricks. That decision made everything far more dangerous. If she was even a fraction of a second too early or too late, the shelves could have collapsed directly onto her with real wood and metal. The entire set fell silent when the cameras rolled. Weisz pushed the shelf at exactly the right moment. The chain reaction worked perfectly. She stepped aside just in time. On screen, it became laughter. Behind the camera, it was a narrow escape. 1. When Arnold Vosloo curses, it is real ancient Egyptian. When Arnold Vosloo curses, threatens, or chants on screen, it is not Hollywood's made-up language. It is real ancient Egyptian. Stephen Sommers pursued authenticity to the extent that he invited scholars onto the set to translate all of Imhotep's dialogue into words that had not been spoken for thousands of years. Every curse, every ritual line, every invocation of the gods was based on historical sources. For Vosloo, this meant hours spent learning how to pronounce unfamiliar sounds, practicing the rhythm and structure of a language long dead, all under hot lights, sweat, and heavy makeup. The effort was not wasted. Imhotep's lines carry a different kind of weight, cold, ancient, and unmistakable. Audiences feel a chill, even without understanding a single word. But for Egyptologists, it is a real language reconstructed from fragments of history. The irony is this Imhotep is not pretending to speak to the dead. He is speaking in their own tongue. So what about you? Which moment from The Mummy, 1999, is the one you remember most? Leave a comment. And if you want to continue unlocking other deleted scenes from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You will be surprised by what Hollywood has kept hidden from you for decades.